Charles Barkley recently uh, said some, in my opinion, some real shit regarding super teams. All right. He said that he roots against super teams and that if he had known that he'd be ridiculed and heckled and ribbed so much for not winning a championship, that if he had known that this was going to happen when he was younger, he would have teamed up with some other superstar and won a championship, for some franchise and got it over with when he was younger. If he had known that there would be that much ridicule about it when he got older. And you have to wonder, when did this start? When did this start with regards to the, you know, the requirement that you're supposed to win a championship in order to be great? Because in the past, there have been a lot of players who've passed through the NBA and are all-time greats that never won a championship. Whether you're talking about, you know, uh, guys like Reggie Miller and Patrick Ewing, Charles Barkley, of course, Karl Malone and John Stockton, who were just part of some ridiculous blasphemy by Stephen A. Snitch. Alex English is another one. Adrian Dantley, who came also close to winning a championship before he was jettisoned from Detroit. George Gervin is another example. Dominique Wilkins, if I haven't said him already. You know, uh, so many great players. Grant Hill was unable to win a championship in his career, even though injuries derailed him. Um, Sidney Moncrief, and so many over. Pete Maravich is another one. There are more great players who haven't won a championship than those who have. And when did this start? When did this start where it was essential for you to win a championship? I think it started, when I think about it, I think it started with the Kobe and Shaq beef. Remember in 2006, Shaq won his fourth title. And at that time, Shaq had four championships, Kobe had three. And that's when Shaq would come out and diss Kobe, Kobe, tell me how my ass tastes. Well, tell me how my ass tastes and all this shit, right? Um, and people would say, yeah, Shaq got four, Kobe has three. Then toward the end of the decade, of course, Kobe went back to back. And then Kobe, one of the first things he said, now I'm ahead. I got five, Shaq got four. Okay? And then, there was the forgotten, if you listen to the media, because it act like it never happened, the forgotten debate between Kobe and Mike. Well, Mike has six, Kobe has five, Duncan has four, then Duncan won his fifth. Then it was all this ring counting shit started. Well, LeBron doesn't have any rings. Kobe has five. Mike has six. Shaq has four. Duncan has four. Then later, of course, five. Uh, how can you be a king with no ring? Then you start having Stephen A. Smith out there saying a great player has to be win a championship in order to be great. Skip Bayless putting pressure on a guy like LeBron James to win a championship. And then you start seeing um, LeBron James joining Miami and the super teams and all that. Now let's make something clear. There have been super teams in the NBA since the late '40s with the Minneapolis Lakers. All right, there have been a lot of super teams. The biggest super team being the Boston Celtics under Russell. But there have been super teams for the eternity of the NBA. The Minneapolis Lakers, Russell Celtics, Bird Celtics, uh, to a great extent, the Laker team of the late '60s and early '70s, even though they were older. The Knicks of the '70s were a super team. Showtime Lakers, the Sixers. of 1967-68 before injuries got in the way. They were a super team. The Sixers of the early to mid 80s with Julius Erving, Moses Malone, Bobby Jones, Andrew Toney, Maurice Cheeks. That was a super team. Bird Celtics, if I haven't said them, they were a super team. Shit, honestly, the Milwaukee Bucks of the 80s were damn near a super team. The Detroit Bad Boys, even though they don't have a lot of Hall of Fame components, when you think about it, when you think of the amount of great players or really, really good players on that team, they kind of qualify as a super team. You have Zeke, Hall of Famer, Joe Dumars, a Hall of Famer, Dennis Rodman, a Hall of Famer. Bill Laimbeer is a borderline Hall of Famer, even though I think he's a piece of shit. John Sally was a very valuable piece. Um, Rick Mahorn was a valuable component of that team. And who else the hell on that team? Vinnie Johnson was a valuable component. Um, Initially, they had Adrian Dantley, a Hall of Famer, but then, of course, he was traded in for Mark Aguirre, who's not quite a Hall of Famer, but a very, very solid player. Very solid. Kind of in the trajectory of a Hall of Famer, but not a Hall of Famer. And yeah, like the Bulls of the '90s, Pippen and Jordan. Then in the late '90s, Pippen, Jordan, Rodman, and now Kukoc, all Hall of Famers. So yeah, there's always been Hall of Famers. These super teams. The difference is they weren't conspiring and joining forces. You know. Now on the one end, it's cool in some ways because it shows that the players have more power than ever before, and that's a good thing. However, on the other end, it sucks if you're a fan of any of the other teams because you want more parity. You don't want to see four superstars on one team because this league is a lot more watered down than it used to be. You know what I'm saying? Back in the day, a team like the Lakers could have a plethora of stars and be favored to win the championship. But a team like Boston or Philly or Detroit posed a threat and could very well beat them. You don't get that same sense lately with the Nets or the Warriors when Kevin Durant was there. You kind of knew that nobody really was going to seriously beat that team full strength. Now, I know there's going to be some people that's going to say that Charles Barkley is being a hypocrite because didn't he play for the Houston Rockets? I think there's some differences though. It's you have to really think about it, but there's some differences. I think it would have been more valid if Barkley had joined the Rockets after they were eliminated by the Rockets in '95. If Charles Barkley had joined the Rockets in '95 after they won a championship, like a couple months, then that would be a very valid comparison and saying, hey man, you're a hypocrite because of what you did. But he didn't join them until a year later when both teams were deteriorating. The Phoenix Suns, who blew a 3-1 lead, of course, to Houston in the semifinals '95, won 59 games in '95. But in '96, because of injuries, largely to KJ and other players, I think they lost a lot of guys too. I think Dan Marley left and signed with the Cleveland Cavaliers. They lost a lot of other players to other teams. They were in a rebuilding process. If I remember correctly, I think Phoenix went 41-41 that year. Charles Barkley had a fine season. I think he averaged like 23 points, 11 rebounds, shot over 50% for the first time in like 3 or 4 seasons. But clearly, you could start to see Barkley was starting to diminish as a player a little bit by that time. The Houston Rockets were defending champions, but they only went 48, in 34 in the regular season. and they lost in the semifinals. Matter of fact, they got swept in the semis by their nemesis at the time, the Seattle Supersonics, who would go on to the NBA Finals. It was in this atmosphere where the Rockets needed some punch and Charles Barkley needed to go somewhere else because he was going to be part of a rebuilding process at age 33. He then signed with the Houston Rockets. Now, I do remember it being some big news at the time, okay? But they didn't conspire with one another. They weren't talking and saying, hey, man, it'll be an unbelievable situation. Akeem, if I can join with you guys. You see, if I join with your team, Micah, Scotty, none of them guys, they couldn't fuck with us. You know what I'm saying? I think that would be an apt decision on your part. Yeah, whatever the fuck that means. But yeah, I think I'm gonna do that. I think I'm gonna join with your team, and we're gonna win a championship. No, it wasn't like that. You know what I'm saying? I think they were about 2 years off from being a super team. If they had joined forces, say 94, 95, rather than 96 going to 97. Um, Now they started off strong. I remember Barkley getting 33 boards in the first game against his former team. Ironically, it was against Phoenix. The first game was against Phoenix, and Barkley actually out rebounded the Phoenix Suns by himself, 33 to 29. He got 33 rebounds. That was his career high. And that year, he averaged 13 and a half rebounds, which was his second highest rebounding average in his career, next to the year in 86-87 when he led the NBA rebounding at 14.6 rebounds per game. Ironically, at 6'4.5" or 6'4" and 5/8", Charles Barkley is the shortest man ever lead league in rebounding. And they start off 21-2. The problem was age and injuries that caught up with that team and those players. And they finished 57-25, but they were up and down. Sometimes they looked like a well-oiled machine that was a title contender, and then sometimes they looked old. And what some people have to also remember is, as Barkley aged, as Olajuwon aged, as Drexler aged, other players became more important on that team. In particular, what were those guys' names? Cuttino Mobley and Michael Dickerson. And by the time Pippen joined them in '99 and abbreviated 50 game season, Drexler was gone. He had retired. Pippen was a shell of himself, and that was exposed in Houston. He now, after would have to have for him to have a championship aspirations after the Bulls, Pippen had to play on an ensemble team like Portland. Um, but Pippen was exposed in Houston. Barkley was getting older, gaining weight. Olajuwon clearly was in the decline. They weren't a super team at that point. To me, the difference is a team like the Nets, Harden, Durant, and Kyrie Irving, they are all still near their prime. You know what I'm saying? Um, Barkley, for a lot of his career, from 87 to about 92, which was a lot of his prime, he played on bad teams for the most part. He played on some pretty bad teams where he played with, some very untalented teams. And by the time he joined Phoenix, he was 29, going on 30 years of age, and had already been in the NBA for 9 years. So he wasted a lot of time either, not getting a lot of minutes playing with those Moses Malone, Julius Erving teams, or after those guys were traded and retired, he played on some really, really fucking bad Philadelphia 76ers team. Really bad. I'm telling you, that trade that they did for Moses Malone, when they essentially traded Moses Malone, who they thought was done, but he still was a guy putting up 20 and 10, but they thought that he was done. Uh, they essentially traded him for some Bazooka Joe bubble gum and a half-eaten bologna sandwich. Seriously, look at that trade. And that trade set back Philadelphia a decade until AI was able to resurrect that franchise. Um, Barkley, he had to play with some bums, man, because they were giving up like uh, future picks for stupid trades and deals in the past. So Barkley's best teammates were guys like Charles Shackelford. You know what I'm saying? A young Jason Williams. Rick Mahorn, I think, and Hershey Hawkins were his best teammates. You're not going to win a championship if those are your best teammates. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I can understand why Charles Barkley probably hates super teams because he thinks to himself, if he could have played with Patrick Ewing, or if he could have played with Michael Jordan, or hell, even Dominique Wilkins, if he could have played with another star of that magnitude, he's probably thinking in the back of his mind, "Oh shit, I could have won 3, 4, 5 championships. That shit ain't fair. Okay, so, that's bullshit. Ernie, Ernie. First of all, Ernie, first of all, if I could have played with, look, first of all, if I could have played with Penny Hardaway, and you give me Michael Jordan and Penny Hardaway in the backcourt, I don't want nothing but championship in 96, 97, 98, and we would have came back in 99 and run again. Nah, but I'm just saying, though. But tell me what you guys think.